Hey, Slater Crusaders, welcome back to our special. In this special, we're just exploring what life is like in these Latin American, South American countries that people are risking so much to leave and come to America, so we can better understand what's really going on at the border here. Right here, we have some facts about what life is like in Guatemala. I want you to pay particular attention to the poverty rate, and infant mortality as well. Steve Hecht is here. He's the editor-at-large at the Impunity Observer, and he's lived in Guatemala since 1972. Mr. Hecht, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Mike. It's wonderful to be with you. Thank you.
I'm glad you're here. So help us paint the picture of what life is like for the person who is leaving their family or even just sending their kids up here. Like, what's it like on the ground?
Well, your statistics paint that picture. For those people, there's a lack of opportunity, no jobs to be found. And when they do have jobs, they're very poor paying jobs compared to the United States. And of course, all of that leads to more violence than would normally happen in a healthy society. So they're fleeing really poverty.
Our last guest made the point, if I'm characterizing it properly, that it's more violence than the poverty even. Do you agree with that?
No, it's the poverty. The violence is a byproduct of the poverty, and that poverty, unfortunately, is exacerbated by the United States government.
How so?
Under the Obama administration, with Joe Biden acting as point man for Obama, they imposed on Guatemala's government the successors to the Fidel Castro-supported guerrilla. There was a supposed peace treaty in 1996, and those people changed their strategy from armed insurrection to internal subversion. And in 2010, the Obama administration started taking advantage of that, and they put guerrilla successor allies into key places in government, specifically the Prosecutor General's office and the High Court and the judiciary in general.
It's amazing. We hear so many things about the border, but we don't understand anything that's going on in politics of Guatemala. And I feel like we should know more. And I know nothing about what you just said. Why did the Obama administration choose that side as opposed to the other? Was there an alternative, or was it choosing between two very bad choices?
Oh, no, there's certainly alternative. The alternative is called rule of law. They want you to believe that you had a traditional, corrupt, as they like to put it, a predatory group that doesn't pay taxes and doesn't have any social consciousness. Well, that might be true, but that's not really the issue, because there are places like Mexico, for instance, that's dominated by cartels, and they're a net immigration country, and they're as corrupt as could possibly be. So it's not just simple corruption, which they like to paint it. And what they do is they divide the country into groups. And they're the good guys, them, and their communist buddies, and then the bad guys, everybody else. And guess what? They're doing that to the United States today.
So again, why would Obama choose the communist people as opposed to the alternative?
Well, I can only speculate about that. He certainly didn't tell me, and he's never really said it. And they don't admit that that's what they're doing. Just like right now, they don't admit that they're purposely flooding the United States with illegal immigrants, but that's the only conclusion that I can come to. And so my conclusion is that this is who Obama is. And when he promised the transformation of America, he was talking about making it into a socialist country.
What do you know about the journey that these Guatemalans take in order to get to America?
Oh, it's awful. It's extremely risky. Unless you have the money, about maybe $10,000 today to pay coyote, you go with coyotes, and it's not particularly risky. The riskiest part is what the cartels do to you. But when you're paying, you generally get treated okay, not all the time. But the people that don't have the money and try to go on their own, they're taking a huge risk. And as a way of illustration, women take birth control measures before they leave. They know they're going to get raped.
How long does the journey take?
If you go with a coyote, it takes about 4 days. But if you go on your own, it takes several weeks, especially if you're walking.
Who has $10,000? If you're escaping poverty, who's got 10 grand laying around?
Not very many people, but they give credit. I mean, the networks of immigrants in the United States and people back at home is very extensive. And so the coyotes could give them credit. They know they're going to get paid. And if you don't pay, not only do you have problems, they're going to take retribution, like gangsters do. But there's also the pressure of your community because you're making it harder for other people to come. And so there are a lot of reasons why the credit system works.
Laura Logan, if I'm characterizing her properly, she says that a lot of the reason why these immigrants are taking 2-3 jobs when they get here is to pay back that credit. And she calls it a modern day form of slavery, right? You're working for these cartels.
I would say that's true. Makes sense. But for them, at least they're working. Back home, they're not working. And so what's left to them is still a lot better than what they came from. And when they finish paying it off, then they're in great shape.
Okay, well, I want to ask you, what is the average Guatemalan's vision of what America is? And then we can compare that to what their life actually is once they get here.
If you're talking about the kind of people that take that dangerous journey and emigrate to the United States looking for more money, their view of America is the land of opportunity. That's where you go to get work. And they're not concerned about the hardships. They're willing to undergo those hardships because they don't have anything where they're coming from.
And then when they get here, does it live up to that expectation that they've set?
I think so, because they're still there. And, just in Guatemala, the remittances are now about $11 billion a year.
Wow.
And that's equal to the sum total of all of Guatemala's exports combined together. It's about 14% of their gross domestic product. So Guatemala is basically living off of those immigrants.
They had to have known, too, these people in Guatemala, that Joe Biden won and that the border was now open. Is that true?
Of course that's true. I mean, there are more cell phones in Guatemala than there are people. And the people in the States have smartphones, and their relatives at home have smartphones, and they're in communication all the time. WhatsApp is a big thing, and I suppose other social media use on the telephone. So they know the communication's there. Information is not a problem these days. The only problem for information is in the United States, people who listen to legacy media, that they don't get all the information that they should get, and they get a lot of false information that they shouldn't get, but they're voluntarily subjecting themselves to that. Guatemalan immigrants don't do that. They get the real story.
So you've painted a picture. What's your assessment then, / what should we do in America? Because if they're leaving abject poverty that we don't even understand here in America, and they come here and life's better, why shouldn't they come across, and why shouldn't we accept them, Mr. Hecht?
Well, here's the point, that they had no legal right to come. Even, you see, you got to distinguish between asylum, which is for refugees, people fleeing persecution. That's specifically defined. And then there are economic migrants. In other words, like Jen Psaki said recently, they're fleeing awful conditions and extreme poverty and violence. Those are not the conditions for asylum. That doesn't qualify for asylum. What happened with asylum was a federal judge, there was a Flores settlement, and so minors could only be held for 20 days. And then a federal judge applied that to adults who were with those minors. And that is what really made the flood into the United States. So those people are economic migrants. They are using a false asylum claim to get a hearing, and that hearing keeps them legally in the United States for 2 or 3 years maybe. And then they don't go to the hearing. And if they get thrown out, they don't go back anyway. So it's a door into the United States, but it's not real asylum. Trump understood this. He changed it by making asylum agreements with Mexico, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So you weren't stopped from asking for asylum, but you had to qualify. So if you request asylum from outside the United States, then there's time to examine your petition. And the fact is that all of those people knew perfectly well that they did not qualify for asylum. So that's how Trump solved the border crisis. Now, Biden, who in a 2019 Democrat debate said, we have to let all of these people who are seeking asylum at least have a hearing. Well, they knew perfectly well, they can't not know, that these people don't qualify for asylum, that they're economic migrants. We have, as a country, no obligation to let in economic migrants. Asylum seekers, yes.
I was just going to ask you, I was literally going to use the word obligation. What is America's obligation for, let's do economic migrants? What's our responsibility? And have you no compassion, sir, to let in people who just want to live a better life for them and their children?
Well, you sure. I have compassion. You do, and most everybody does. But here's the question you got to ask yourself. What would you do with who knows how many, 100, 200 million migrants? Our country would not be our country anymore if we took in that many people.
You've been there since 1972. I want to ask you, what is a cultural aspect, or what's one aspect of Guatemalan culture that you find to be compatible with American culture, and then another one that is incompatible with American culture?
I think the compatible one is, in a way, they don't have the same history. You know, their rights, according to their constitution is good, but according to their rights don't come from the creator like ours do. So our rights precede government. So we're a fiercely independent people, at least we have been recently, and now today it's a different story. But Guatemalans don't like to be dominated. They don't like to be told what to do. And that's the problem the United States is running into. That's what's happening to Biden. He was able to lean on them when he was vice president, running the show for Obama, because nobody could believe that the United States could act as criminally as it did. And he put judges in the high court in Guatemala that have grossly violated Guatemala's constitution. And it's a political thing. And they have exacerbated violence. They have attacked business. They're anti-business. They have prosecutors, the same thing. The prosecutors and the judges work together, and they're really harming the country because they happen to fit into Biden and Obama's political agenda. And people couldn't believe that. Now they're resisting. So Biden is president. The judges that he put in 5 years ago, their term is expiring on April 14th. And so Biden's people, his State Department, his National Security Council, have been busy attempting to force more criminal socialists on Guatemala. And Guatemala has been resisting that. The Guatemalan Congress, the president, its Supreme Court, which is not the highest court. That's complicated. But anyway, they have appointments to the Constitutional Court, which is its last word on judicial matters. And Guatemalans don't want criminals running their court for another 5 years, and they've been resisting the United States. So all this talk about Biden is going to mitigate and now Kamala Harris, right? Mitigate the circumstances that promote irregular migration. That is a complete lie. It's 180 degrees opposite from what they're doing. They're making things much worse. And Guatemalans are resisting, and you got to hand it to them for resisting that.
ImpunityObserver.com. Stephen Hecht, editor-at-large. Stephen, thanks for your insight. Appreciate you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mike. Great to be with you anytime.